close your eyes and get ready to sleep, try to imagine this. Beneath your home, beneath the familiar roads across America, ancient streams of water are quietly flowing, silently nourishing the trees, the farms, the cities, and even the glass of water in your hand. Groundwater, the hidden lifeline of the planet, will take you on a very gentle, very slow journey, exploring underground aquifers as Earth's secret memory, preserving thousands of years of climate history, shaping where humans settle and sheltering us in ways few ever see. Let this soft voice lull you into sleep while your mind is still nourished by profound scientific truths. Don't forget to subscribe to Smart Sleep to accompany us every night when the night has folded away the hurried sounds of a long day, when the house around you grows quiet and there is only the gentle amber light of a lamp and the steady breathing of your loved ones nearby, or the stillness of you alone with yourself. Let us take one step back and try to think about something we touch every day, drink, cook with, bathe in, water our plants with, but so rarely pause to ask, where did you come from? Those are the drops of water, not the great rivers, not the rolling oceans, but the waters beneath the ground, the hidden lifeblood of this planet. It may sound ordinary, but the truth is that many of the water droplets right under your feet, under a small house in Ohio, a field in Kansas, or a road in Texas, may have existed in that darkness longer than the history of the United States itself, and far longer than many of the ancient civilizations we read about in books. They lie there, threading through layers of rock, sand, and sediment, seeping down from rains so ancient that, if we close our eyes and trace time backwards, the first people on this continent had not yet set foot here. The miracle is that when you turned on the tap this morning and poured a clear glass of water, thinking it was something entirely ordinary, you were, without knowing it, touching an ancient stream of memory, a long story that the earth has patiently written over thousands, tens of thousands of years, stored within its groundwater. Groundwater is not just water that seeps down and lies there. It is a quiet diary, recording each shift in climate, each ice age pressing down and then retreating, each advance and retreat of the seas, each volcanic eruption, each season of harsh drought and of unending rain. Every time rainwater soaks in, it carries with it the imprint of the atmosphere at that moment. Temperature, carbon levels, tiny volcanic dust, traces of plants and animals that lived and died. When that water settles into layers of limestone, sandstone, basalt, or gravel, it is sealed together with its era, so that thousands of years later, when humans drill wells, pump water, and analyze it, we can read those signatures like reading an ancient page written in the language of chemistry and isotopes. Thinking of that, perhaps the simple glass of water on your bedside tonight suddenly feels a little more dignified, not loud, not showy, but a quiet connection between you, someone listening to this story before sleep, and those moments when the earth had no shining cities, no arterial highways, no skyscrapers mirrored in glass. For many people your age, who have witnessed war, crisis, moves, separations, reunions, the feeling of time has likely changed. Everything on the surface seems to shift too fast, but beneath our feet, the groundwater lives by a different rhythm, slow, persistent, unhurried by the latest headlines, unshaken by the turbulence of a day or a year. It helps us remember that there is still a deeper order, where time is measured in centuries, millennia, not in weeks or financial quarters. As you rest, your heart beating slower, your breath growing softer, perhaps this is the right moment to sense the longer breath of the planet, kept in those water-bearing layers. If we are patient enough to listen, the groundwater will tell us that there were times when the earth was much colder, glaciers crawling over the land, grinding rock to powder, and then, thousands of years later, that very powder became a natural filter through which rain percolates, cleansing, clarifying, and holding water for a future it could not foresee. It will tell of warmer ages, of rising seas, of salt pushing inland and then retreating, leaving behind faint salinity in certain deep aquifers. It also remembers the industrial footprints of humankind, compounds, metals, chemicals that slipped down, seeping into water veins that had lain peaceful for centuries. Water does not argue, does not accuse. It simply retains everything, honest to the point of being ruthless. But it is precisely that honesty that makes it the ancient memory of the earth, a record scientists can read and understand, and from there warn us about what is happening and what may come. And you see, just by sitting here in your small room, without stepping outside, without looking at complex diagrams, we can still imagine that journey. The first raindrops of a season falling on the wooden roof of an immigrant family's house more than 100 years ago, some of it evaporating, some running into the creek, and a tiny fraction slowly soaking through the wild soil, through roots of grass, through rich topsoil, down to gravel, then continuing deeper, year after year, generation after generation. The old house may have been torn down, the dirt road paved, the city expanded, but those droplets kept traveling in the dark, gathering into an aquifer, silently flowing, slow enough for no one to notice, enduring enough that when our grandchildren sink a well, it will rise up to answer. There is something about that feeling that resembles your family's memory. Old stories your grandparents told again and again, the letters, the yellowing photographs. They no longer sit out on the table every day, but lie deep somewhere, and then at some moment, a story, a smell, a voice pulls them back to the surface. Groundwater is the same. It does not perform like a waterfall, does not dazzle like a blue sea, but it is the foundation. It supports crops, holds together the small towns of the Midwest, the South, the West, places you may have lived in, driven past and looked out over their endless fields without knowing that all that life was suspended on a layer of water memory beneath. And precisely because groundwater has memory, it also gently reminds us of responsibility. When we were young, we drank water, used water, threw away trash, used pesticides, poured chemicals, perhaps without much thought. But after decades of watching nature change, ice melt, droughts, wildfires, perhaps you, the one hearing these words, now understand clearly this feeling. Small choices, repeated long enough, leave marks on later generations. The water below keeps those marks. Some aquifers need hundreds, even thousands of years to be replenished. In some places, we are withdrawing water far faster than it can naturally return, like quietly tearing out the last pages of a family diary without writing new stories in. But please, do not worry too much at this hour. As you are getting ready to sleep, the purpose of this story is not to keep you awake, but to help you feel that you are lying inside a very wide network of connection between past and present, sky and underground, the glass of water in your hand, and the 1,000-year flow beneath your feet. Just recognizing that can make your sleep more peaceful, because you understand that you are not separate from nature, but a very small, very gentle part of a much larger system. Take one very slow breath. Imagine a cool stream of air entering, like clear water threading through every cell, then softly flowing out, like the way the aquifers move patiently, without noise, without haste. Each night, when you place a glass of water by your bed, try to give yourself a brief moment of gratitude. Gratitude for the silent journey of those droplets. Gratitude for the human hands that learned how to find, convey, filter, and protect them. And let the story of groundwater, the ancient memory of the earth, lull you to sleep with a very light feeling that you are being held, sheltered by a long-lived current of memory. Tonight, just rest. The deep things beneath the earth will go on with their work, quiet, precise, steadfast, and we need only sleep well, so that tomorrow, if we wish, we can open another page of that groundwater diary together. And then, if the aquifer is the ancient memory of the earth, we must ask ourselves, how many times in history have humans thought they freely chose where to live, when in truth, they were only listening to an invisible river beneath their feet? Has groundwater been silently deciding everything? Let us sink a little deeper into the mattress now, loosen our shoulders, and let tonight's story flow as slowly as a gentle underground stream. We often think humans choose where to live because the soil is fertile, because it is close to a big river, close to the sea, because the climate is pleasant, because trade routes are convenient. All of that is true, but not complete. Hidden beneath those obvious reasons is a simple condition that determines survival. Is there clean, reliable water or not? In many parts of America, the towns, farms, and family ranches you have passed by, lived in, and loved stand firm, not only because there is a river on the map, but because below them lies another river, the groundwater. When the first European settlers set foot in America, they had no geologic maps, no clear concept of aquifers as we have today. They only had their eyes, their hands, and their instincts. They chose places where springs never dried up, where small ponds stayed full, where valleys remained green longer than the land around, where a shallow well already hit water. They thought it was simply good land. But in reality, they had just unconsciously laid their lives upon the shoulders of a stable aquifer, where groundwater was easy to reach. There were people, churches, schools, general stores, post offices, children running and playing. Where it was absent, no matter how beautiful, footsteps thinned out. If you grew up in a small town in the Midwest, the Great Plains, or on the fields of Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, it is very likely your whole childhood was tied to deep wells reaching into a water-bearing layer as wide as a sea aquifers like the Ogallala. From there, water was pumped up to irrigate corn, wheat, and hay for cattle, to cool scorching summer days, to run into the kitchen sink, the shower, the morning coffee pot. Without that invisible river, there would be no green patches seen from above, no golden fields where combines run clear to the horizon. That underground river does not curve past cities like the Mississippi or the Colorado, but its influence on modern American life is no less. What is interesting is that for centuries, people needed only to see here a well has water for it to be reason enough to build a house, a camp. Many decisions of migration that seemed to come from personal desire or economic opportunity were, at root, limited by one calm condition: is there water below or not? The routes of railroads, locations of depots, of markets, of emerging towns, again and again formed around reliable water points, springs, wells, artesian flows, small lakes fed by groundwater. Those stopping points later became communities, then cities. If we look at a wide map of America at night, seeing clusters of lights, chains of cities, we may think they are purely the result of economics, politics, history. But if we slowly peel that map back and look at groundwater maps, we will see a coincidence that is not coincidence at all. Do you remember the old stories of settlers seeking land, carrying dowsing rods, pressing their ears to the ground, reading grasses and shrubs? There may be legend in that, but the truth is, humans learned to read groundwater signals long before exploratory drilling. Where vegetation is greener than its surroundings, where dew lingers, where soil stays moist, there is a chance of a river beneath. Those hints led them to places that later became villages, family farms lasting many generations. Perhaps among those listening tonight, someone was born on a farm where parents or grandparents said, "The reason our home is here is because, back then, when we dug down, we found water." The sentence sounds simple, but behind it lies a scientific truth. The aquifer is an invisible frame, setting the boundary between habitable and uninhabitable. Today's geologists can map out aquifers as vast reservoirs inside rock, connected by countless tiny pores. But for farmers, ranchers, and 19th century homesteaders, they only knew, here wells are always full. There, you can dig until exhaustion and still be dry. That quiet difference decided where people grew dense, where they did not, where communities thrived, where only a few old foundations, a tiny graveyard, an abandoned church remain. Groundwater does not claim credit, but if you removed it from the story, many chapters of American settlement could no longer be told. We often speak of great rivers like the Mississippi, Missouri, Rio Grande, Columbia, Ohio, as axes of transport, trade, strategy. That is entirely correct. But alongside those stars, there are countless humble communities, far from major riverbanks, that have survived thanks to wells drawing from stable aquifers. Small, uncelebrated towns off tourist maps, with a single gas station, a diner, a little church, sometimes persist quietly for 100 years, precisely because of the invisible river below. It brings just enough drinking and irrigation water without ever making a spectacle on the surface. From a scientific perspective, the presence or absence of a suitable aquifer beneath is as important a factor as climate. Fractured rock, porous sands and gravels, soluble limestone forming voids, all allow rainwater to seep in, storing it as a slow reservoir. Thick clays, dense, non-porous rock block water, making it hard to secure stable supplies without importing from elsewhere. The more we understand this, the more we recognize that those seemingly natural human choices to live here, to plant here, to build here, are shaped by the hidden architecture beneath our feet. In other words, Often it is not we who choose the place, but water that chooses for us. In the 20th century, deep drilling and powerful pumps allowed humanity to temporarily escape that limit. We could tap deeper layers, pump larger volumes, turn dry land into green fields. The green circles seen from above, formed by pivot irrigation, are iconic images of the partnership between groundwater and engineering. But as you have surely heard, when we pump faster than rainfall can replenish, percolating down, passing through soil, filtering through rock, rejoining the store, the groundwater level falls. Old wells go dry. That is when we run up against an old truth. We cannot forever outrun the planet's long, steady rhythms. Tonight, as you hear this in the quiet, you may recall scenes from drought years, news about cracked fields, shuttered feedlots, empty reservoirs. Behind those images lies, in part, the story of an invisible river thinning out. But let your mind stay calm. Science does not only tell us of risk, it also offers solutions. Using water more wisely, smarter irrigation, protecting recharge zones, monitoring groundwater quality, keeping chemicals and waste from seeping down. Each adjustment our society makes is a gentle way of restoring balance to the veins that have nourished us for generations. There is something very beautiful in seeing groundwater through the eyes of someone who has lived many seasons like you. At 50, 60, 70, or 80, you know that everything truly enduring happens slowly. A lasting marriage, a lifelong friendship, a peaceful neighborhood, an old tree, a community built on respect. Groundwater is the same. It never rushes onto the front page. It seeps, accumulates, gathers into veins, keeps the land from dying of thirst, keeps communities rooted, realizing that we may see ourselves as a kind of family aquifer, quiet, without need for noise, yet a source of nourishment for children, grandchildren, those we love. Try to imagine tonight, beneath the home where you lie, whether an apartment in the city or a single-story house in the suburbs, is a network of water, fragile yet enduring. Somewhere nearby, there are water points, pipes, deep wells linking to a common aquifer that generations have relied on. You are part of that chain. Those before you chose a place with water and built their lives. Then you were born. Tomorrow that same water will keep sustaining the younger ones. The invisible river has helped decide where we stand, but once we understand it, we have a chance to respond with respect, with more careful choices. Now let your eyes rest a little more. Release your forehead, soften your jaw. Let your breath flow evenly, like a steady aquifer, unhurried, unforced. You do not need to remember all the terms, the rock layers, the aquifer names. What matters is sensing the gentle message behind the science. We have never lived alone on some meaningless crust. From the sky fall the raindrops. They soak into the ground, rest below, then rise to sustain us. Our decisions that seem personal, we will build our house here, turn out to be guided by nature's patient hand. If there is anything fated in humanity's story of home, it is the presence or absence of water. The invisible rivers beneath the ground never speak, yet they have quietly written the map of settlement, economy, agriculture, and memory of an entire country. Knowing this, we can close our eyes with a greater sense of ease. Above us, a familiar roof. Beneath us, an ancient network of water veins still doing their work, silently supporting life. And as we understand that these invisible rivers have quietly helped choose where we live, the next question arises naturally. If there are aquifers shaping generations' footsteps, is there some secret respiratory system that nourishes all of America each day without us truly noticing? Aquifers, the vast groundwater reservoirs, are precisely that hidden freshwater lung. If you are feeling a little tired after a long day, allow yourself to lie still, breathe more slowly, and imagine your body as a sleeping map of the United States. In your chest is your heart, and beneath the broad central plains, there is a chamber of fresh water stretched out. The Ogallala, part of the High Plains Aquifer System, from South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas. Like an underground blanket, Ogallala rests in the earth, storing rain and meltwater that seeped down long ago. In some places thousands of years ago. Every time you see green cornfields, perfect pivot irrigation circles in satellite images, herds of cattle, wheat silos, small towns surviving in climates not always gentle there, the aquifer is quietly inhaling and exhaling for the whole system. When we call it a lung, it is not just pretty language. Scientifically, the role is clear. The aquifer receives water from rain, from melting snow, from surface water infiltrating, holds it in pore spaces between sand, gravel, fractured rock, then releases it slowly to wells, to streams, to roots. It tempers dry seasons, stabilizes, flows. Much like lungs smooth the body's rhythm, preventing us from starving for oxygen just because of a few uneven breaths. And like lungs, if it is drained or smoked out, it will not scream loudly. It will weaken quietly until the moment we realize it is later than we thought. Ogallala is the clearest example of that fragility. After World War II, with modern drilling and pumping technology, groundwater from Ogallala was pulled up intensely to turn dry lands into bread baskets. Corn, wheat, cotton, hay, beef, milk, all finding their way onto American tables, including your own. The water in your glass, the milk in your fridge, the bread on your plate, the corn in your salad, the Sunday family barbecue. Somewhere in there is the footprint of the aquifer. But unlike a river whose shrinkage is visible, an aquifer declines in silence. In many areas, water levels drop year by year. Wells that once served a whole farm no longer reach it. The reason is not that the aquifer is angry, but that the rate of pumping for irrigation and production has exceeded the rate at which rain and snow can infiltrate, pass through soil, filter through rock, and rejoin the reserve. Some parts of Ogallala hold ancient fossil water, accumulated under climate conditions very different from today and nearly impossible to replenish on a human timescale. That is scientific fact, not fear-mongering, but a gentle reminder. We are using part of the water memory vault to sustain the present. Now, imagine you are looking down at the United States in darkness. Major cities blaze with light, highways glow like threads. But if we replaced electric light with water light, if every place dependent on aquifers lit up, you would see vast regions in the nation's center shining. There, aquifers are not just geology. They are economy, jobs, the lives of farm families, tuition for children, full plates of food. When we call Ogallala the freshwater lung feeding the nation. It is no exaggeration. A significant portion of U.S. irrigation water comes from here, contributing to the abundant, affordable food Americans have known for decades. Now, take a light breath with me. Inhale slowly, exhale long, and picture droplets moving beneath the still soil. Water seeping down not like a roaring waterfall, but bit by bit, like the ticks of a clock. Each drop spending months, years, to descend a small depth, collecting in rock like the airspace in your lungs. When we lower a well casing and start the pump, we are borrowing the earth's breath. To borrow means we must know how to stop, or at least slow down, before the lungs are exhausted. Science helps us measure levels, map reservoirs, forecast futures. That is the precise technical part. But tonight, in this story, I want to share with you the rest. A gentle sense of responsibility for what we cannot see. Among those listening, there may be people who have lived their whole lives in cities, never seeing a well or an endless cornfield, but you are still within this network. Supermarket food, milk in your glass, the family Thanksgiving meal, all are threads connecting you to farmers standing over Ogallala, thinking each day, how much can we pump this year? What should we plant? Will the well still provide enough next season? And in those thoughts is a question for the future of their children. As you listen to this before sleep, you too quietly join a cross-generational conversation. What kind of lung do we want to leave behind? Seeing Ogallala as a living organ, we recognize some very human truths. First, it is not infinite. Like lungs, if we fill it with smoke and never let it rest, it will weaken. Second, it can respond when we reduce overpumping, change irrigation methods, switch to less thirsty crops, protect recharge lands from paving and hardening. It has a chance to recover somewhat. In some communities, residents, scientists, and local authorities have already begun setting water use limits, using drip irrigation, choosing suitable crops, tracking every inch of water level. These stories do not shout across national news, but they are happening. Like deeper breaths someone decides to gift themselves. In this quiet space, let your mind drift to the image of an elderly farmer standing in his field at sunset. He has lived his whole life on land above the aquifer. He remembers when the well was full and gushed easily. He also sees how in recent years he has had to drill deeper, pump harder. As he switches off the pump and the sky turns violet, surely somewhere in his thoughts he touches the same question you hear tonight. Will there still be enough water for the next generation to keep this dream alive? That concern is not a shout. It is a pause, just like you, after many years and many choices, sometimes lying awake before sleep, thinking about what you are leaving behind, not in money, but in foundations. The aquifer, seen this way, becomes a beautiful bridge between science and the gentle ethics of being human. Science tells us aquifers need time to recover, that current withdrawal rates in many places are not sustainable. Ethics reminds us we were given a relatively healthy lung by those before us. We can choose not to leave a weakened one to those who come after. And if you are lying here listening at 60, 70, 80, you have every right to feel like a keeper of memory. You have seen nature once better, then changing, and your stories shared with your children and grandchildren are themselves part of the strength that helps them care about what lies beneath the ground. Tonight, there is no need for guilt, no need for helplessness. Simply knowing that once we understand the aquifer as a lung, we will naturally soften in the way we use water, turning off the tap a little earlier, supporting crops produced more sustainably, trusting and backing the policies and communities trying to protect groundwater. Those very small things, added up across millions of people, can slowly give the aquifer more oxygen. Just like a person who decides to walk a few extra minutes each day, to let go of one small bad habit, not to live forever, but to breathe more easily. Now, let your body begin to sink into the mattress. Inhale, and imagine yourself gathering in all this new understanding that beneath the ground is not an empty, meaningless space, but a living organ, that aquifers like Ogallala have been and still are nourishing meals, family memories, an entire American way of life. Exhale and gradually release the worries you don't need. Science will continue to do its part. Young people will continue to create solutions. The groundwater, if respected, will continue to flow, and you, in this moment, only need to allow yourself to rest with the feeling that you've seen a wider picture. And from now on, each glass of water, each meal, will carry a little more gratitude for the quiet lungs beneath your feet. And once we've spoken of these groundwater lungs, sustaining an entire nation, it may be time to return to something very small, yet deeply personal to each of us. Why does the water at our home, in our city, have such a distinct taste? And why does that taste change as soon as we move somewhere else? If tonight you are lying in your familiar bed, with a glass of water set on the table beside you, gently let your memory walk along the stages of your life. Perhaps you once lived in another state, visited children or grandchildren in another state, went to see relatives, or traveled, and you remember a tiny detail younger people often overlook. The water tastes different in every place. In some places, tap water feels light, delicate, disappearing quickly in your mouth. Elsewhere it feels heavier, a bit harsher, as if it clings to your tongue. Some places carry a faint scent of damp earth after rain, others a hint of stone, or a trace of metal, a breath of volcanic ash, a very subtle saltiness. We usually attribute this to brands, treatment technology, bottled water companies, but before it became a brand, that glass of water had taken a long journey through underground rock layers. And it is that journey, that geology beneath your feet, that creates the secret of the familiar taste of your drinking water. Scientifically, pure H2O is almost odorless and tasteless. But in reality, the water we drink every day is never empty. Like in a laboratory, rain falls, seeps through soil, flows through rock, meets minerals, salts, trace metals. These elements dissolve into the water in tiny amounts, safe for health and sufficient to create very different shades of taste. Together we call them total dissolved solids. Hardness, mineral composition, they are the tone of voice of each region's groundwater. If you live in an area rich in limestone, as in many parts of the Midwest or Southeast, the water is often harder, meaning it contains more calcium and magnesium. A glass there feels firm, rounded, a bit heavier on the tongue. Kettles scale up with white deposits. Soap lathers less easily, Drink it long enough, and it becomes a familiar, even good taste in its own way, giving a sense of deep, full coolness. That is not a flaw in the system. It is a very polite greeting from ancient limestone layers that once lay beneath a sea millions of years ago, formed from shells, corals, and marine life compressed into rock. Each sip you drink is a trace of minerals filtered from that ancient ocean. By contrast, places supplied by lakes in granitic mountains or by rainwater with little contact with limestone may have softer water with fewer minerals, feeling light and clear, sliding across the tongue without much aftertaste. Many cities using carefully managed surface water produce this kind of taste, delicate and easy to drink. Then, when people move to a harder water region, it feels strange on the palate. That strangeness is the geologic map whispering beneath your taste buds. In regions with basalt, volcanic ash, or young volcanic bedrock, the water may carry different markers, sometimes smoother, sometimes with a subtle metallic hint of iron, manganese, or other characteristic minerals. If you've ever drunk from a spring in a volcanic area, or from a well on volcanic ground, you may have sensed something warm, rich, that is hard to name. That is ancient molten rock now resting as solid stone, lending a bit of its character to the water. In places that were once seafloors now uplifted, groundwater may pass through sediments rich in salts, gypsum, sulfates. Some wells there can taste a little salty or sharp. If it exceeds safety limits, it must be treated, but at very low levels it becomes a distinctive note. Many older people remember very clearly the taste of our old well water, a taste modern bottled water cannot replicate, because it is not just H2O. It is part of the land's language where they were born. There are also areas where people complain of a rusty taste, a faint rotten egg smell from hydrogen sulfide or yellowish water. Here, science helps us distinguish between flavors coming from natural geology, which can be treated, and signs of contamination from human activity, which demand caution. But tonight, instead of worrying, let's focus on the beautiful part, where water is kept safe. The small differences in taste are the land's identity card, the geologic fingerprint you sip every day. Remember a time you visited your children in another state, drank tap water in their new home, and said, your water tastes different from back home." That offhand comment is, in fact, very profound. You just perceived a difference in mineral composition, in water source, in the type of rock those droplets met. Your children or grandchildren might say, "It's the utility, it's the filter system." That's partly true, but beneath the steel pipes and treatment plants is still the original source. Which river, which lake, which aquifer, what rocks around it. Technology can clean, remove microbes, adjust chlorine, but it cannot completely erase the underlying personality given by the minerals. To picture it more easily, you can think of each region's water as a local accent. All are speaking the same language, but the South, the East, the Midwest, New York, California, each has a slightly different sound. Water is the same. All are safe drinking water, but some are softer, some harder, some with a hint of stone, some like they've passed through a forest, some carrying the echo of ancient lava. Once we recognize this, each sip becomes a moment of connection with the ground. just quenching thirst. We are drinking in a small geologic story. And with that gentle perspective, you'll see that even your habit of choosing a bottled water brand is, in some way, a conversation with groundwater. Many brands advertise sources from certain mountains, aquifers, protected areas. Beneath the marketing, the core message is the same. Their water carries the voice of the rock, the slopes, the aquifer where it was born. When you pick one because it tastes right, goes down easy, you are quietly favoring a certain mineral pattern, a certain origin, and those minerals ultimately come from ancient rock, from prehistoric seas, from volcanic ash, from tectonic movements over millions of years. Tonight, as the planet slowly settles into sleep, we can take our time with this understanding. No need to strain to remember data. Just acknowledge one thing: that seemingly ordinary glass of water on your bedside table did not appear from nowhere. It came from rain, from snow, from rivers, from aquifers, traveling through rock layers holding Earth's history, guided by human hands, cleaned, and offered to you. Your task is to take a sip, feel it cool as it passes your throat, and know that in that coolness there is a hint of limestone that was once seashell, a hint of basalt that once burned red, a tiny imprint of this land that you will miss if you ever leave. For those who have lived in many states, in many places, the glass of water becomes a subtle marker of home. The water back there tasted different. The water at the old farm was so deeply refreshing. That feeling is very real. It is not just nostalgia, it is your body remembering the mineral mix that suited it. Your mind binding a flavor to a beloved patch of sky. And when we understand that difference comes from groundwater, from bedrock, we can smile. Every region has not only its own voice, food, landscape, but also its own water taste, a quiet identity we drink daily without naming. As with earlier parts of this story, the science here is not meant to unsettle you. On the contrary, it offers a new reassurance. The familiar things around us have roots, have rules, are not random. If your home water, tested safe, is a bit harder than elsewhere, that is not wrong, but a mark of local geology. If you use a filter to adjust it, that is like choosing to wear glasses. You fine-tune for your comfort, but still respect where the water came from. Now, try taking a very small sip, very slowly. Let the water touch the tip of your tongue, the length of it, then slide down your throat. Don't judge it, just notice. Ah, this is the voice of the land I am in. It has passed through certain rocks. It carries certain minerals. It is the result of many cycles. To feel it that way naturally makes us more grateful, less likely to treat things as mere givens. And that quiet gratitude, in its strange way, helps the mind soften, release some of the day's unnecessary urgency. If you have ever worried about the world, the environment, the future, small pieces of knowledge like this can become gentle anchors. Because when you understand that water has flavor, because it carries the story of the land, you also understand that when we pollute water, we are disrupting that story. And if we choose to protect, to waste less, to support groundwater protection, we are helping that story continue in a better way. You don't need to be an activist. Just living with a bit of awareness, a bit of tenderness toward your daily glass of water is enough. Now let your eyes slowly close. Your breath falls into a slower rhythm. Your body grows heavier against the mattress. In the quiet dark, imagine beneath the ground layers of rock holding memories of ancient seas, old volcanoes, past risings and fallings of continents, and in the cracks of those rocks, water resting, waiting to be called up as rain, as dew, as your glass of water. Every sip, if you listen, is a tiny conversation with the planet's history, and for a life that has passed through many decades like yours, there may be nothing more fitting before sleep than a soft reminder that you are still being supported by stories far longer than any worry of the day. And once we've realized that every glass of water carries its own voice of the earth, the next question arises naturally. If just a few minerals can change water's taste so much, then what happens when droplets spend thousands of years patiently touching rock in the dark? If tonight you allow your mind to go a little deeper, gently we will leave the glass on the bedside and go down into the ground, to places few have seen with their own eyes, yet that are calming even in imagination. Vast limestone caverns, underground lakes clear as crystal, stalactites hanging from ceilings, stalagmites rising from cave floors, silent like motionless stone candles. There is no crashing surf there, no wind singing through trees, no neon glare, only darkness, cool air, and the soft ticking of water drops falling steadily, slowly through centuries, like the second hand of a clock that never stops. Scientifically, these wonders begin with something very simple. Rainwater, as it passes through the atmosphere and soil, picks up a little carbon dioxide and becomes slightly acidic. As it percolates into limestone rich in calcium carbonate, the water gently nibbles at the rock, dissolving some of it and forming a solution carrying calcium and bicarbonate ions. As this solution moves through cracks and then drips into underground voids, spaces that will become caves, it begins to do the opposite, releasing some carbon dioxide into the cave air and reprecipitating calcium carbonate. Each drop hanging from the ceiling can leave behind a film so thin the eye cannot detect it, but repeated over hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years, it forms a stalactite, like a stone fang reaching down. When drops hit the floor, remaining minerals build a little column, growing upward, the stalagmite. The astonishing part is the speed of this sculpture. Many large stalactites and stalagmites are thought to require tens of thousands of years to form, which means what you see. If you've ever visited a cave in Kentucky, New Mexico, Virginia, or anywhere else, is the joint work of countless droplets laboring steadily long before the United States existed, before the roads you've driven, before there was writing to record this land's history. It is unrushed, unboastful, simply performing precise chemical arithmetic, so precise that each thin layer in the calcite can record information about climate, rainfall, and outside conditions at the moment it formed. Scientists can carefully core a stalactite and read its layers like tree rings, measuring oxygen isotope ratios, trace elements, and from that infer whether a period was warmer or colder, wetter or drier, whether unusual events occurred. So while we see serene beauty, they see a natural clock and data archive. Stalactites, stalagmites, underground lakes are not just scenic attractions, they are Earth's memory, like aquifers, but in a visible form you can touch, illuminated by soft, golden lights on a guided tour. But tonight, we don't need instruments or hard hats, Just close your eyes and imagine walking down a cool stairway, hand gliding along damp stone. The air below is thick yet clean, smelling of wet rock, of time. Any light is faint and warm, just enough to reveal stone columns glowing like frozen wax. In the distance, a still underground pool mirrors the ceiling like glass. If you breathe softly, you hear it more clearly. If a drop falls, the talk echoes like a clock in an empty room. Each such drop, in the daytime world, would go unnoticed, but in the cave, it becomes a heartbeat. It is the slow breath of the planet, steady, unhurried, independent of schedules and news. And many of those pools and stone forests lie directly beneath regions where people have lived for a long time. You may have driven a highway without knowing a vast cave system lay under your wheels, picnicked in a park without knowing beneath it was a clear underground lake where droplets have gathered for millennia. If you think about it, that is both humbling and comforting. The world is not only what we see. In the U.S., some caves are like stone cathedrals, with high vaults, tall pillars, deep underground waters. Scientists call these karst systems, formed mainly in limestone. Groundwater is the main artist here, both destroyer and builder. It dissolves rock to create voids, then uses that dissolved material to build stalactites. It carves corridors, chambers, ledges, then decorates them with draperies, pillars, columns, as if guided by a patient hand. Meanwhile, we humans arrive only for a brief moment in that long performance. From a scientific standpoint, this matters greatly. Caves and underground lakes show us where water goes, how it flows, how long it takes, what it carries. They help us assess the sustainability of water sources, pollution risks, the links between surface water, rainfall, and groundwater, color bands on walls, sediments at lake edges, sparkling crystals, all are clues. When we understand them, we see how our actions affect the hidden system underfoot, a system which, if damaged, can cause subsidence, water loss, lasting contamination. Protecting karst regions, managing waste, limiting careless construction is not just about scenic landscapes, but about safeguarding the very underground reservoirs that nourish our communities. But at this hour, as your breath evens out, you may prefer the gentler side of the story, knowing that somewhere deep below, there are places where time moves so slowly it almost stops. A stalactite several meters long is the result of uncounted quiet nights like this one. Uncounted rains have fallen, uncounted flows have passed, uncounted human generations have come and gone, while the cave's droplets keep to their schedule, gather on the ceiling, release gas, fall, leave a thin ring of mineral. No complaint, no display. Just water doing its part. If you have lived long, you understand the value of what is patient, repeated, unshowy. A lasting bond, a steady family, a strong character are not built on brief flashes of brilliance, but on small acts repeated in silence, stalactites and stalagmites, in that sense, are a beautiful image of people like you. A lifetime of work, raising children, caring for others, serving the community without needing your name in print, yet leaving a strong stone pillar in others' lives. Groundwater, carved rock, underground caves and waters host special forms of life. There are fish, shrimp, insects that have no eyes, no pigment, yet have developed other, sharper senses. They adapt to absolute darkness, to sparse energy. That raises a big scientific question. If beneath our feet, with just a little water, life persists in such hidden ways, might other planets with underground water harbor life too, even where sunlight barely reaches? That question can take us far, but it also makes each tiny dripping sound more precious. Those drops are not only sculpting stone, but building rare habitats. But now, the night has deepened. We won't chase distant hypotheses. Let's return to your room, your pillow, your blanket, and the sense of safety in this small space you call home. Here, those caves are images in your mind, but their effect is real. They remind us of slow, steady processes that keep the world stable while we seldom think of them. Groundwater is not just something to pump. It is a hidden sculptor, a climate archivist, a designer of crystal lakes beneath us. Next time you see a photo of stalactites and stalagmites, pause a bit longer. Don't just think beautiful and scroll on. Think of countless diligent droplets, long unobserved nights, turning seasons above, all converging into one gentle stone curve. Then think of your own life. How many things you've done without recognition. How many times you chose patience over anger. How many times you stood firm instead of giving up. From afar, those choices too form their own stalactite in someone else's life. And once we've grown familiar with stalactites, stalagmites, underground lakes as sculptures of water and time, another question softly appears. If in that darkness water can carve a whole world, might there also be creatures quietly living there with those droplets? Let your body stay still. Blanket pulled to a comfortable warmth. Breath slowed. Now we gently leave the lit ground. Once more fields, cities, familiar roads, and return to deep caves and hidden channels. But this time not just to admire the stone, we go to find the secret inhabitants of the dark. Blind fish, pale shrimp like mist, tiny almost transparent creatures, and communities of bacteria that live on rock and chemicals, needing no sunlight. This is the part of the story many never hear in a lifetime, yet it brings a gentle sense of comfort. Life is more persistent than we think, even in places that seem utterly silent. Scientifically, creatures that spend their entire lives in caves and groundwater are called obligate cave dwellers. Obligate groundwater species. They are not just ordinary animals that got lost below. Over thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years, they have truly changed to fit absolute darkness and scarce energy. Sunlight, the foundation of almost all surface ecosystems, is completely absent. There are no green leaves, no fields of golden wheat, and yet life continues, quietly carrying a message. As long as there is a little water, a little energy, we will find a way. Imagine a cave fish in groundwater. It has no eyes, or only shrunken spots beneath milky skin. No bright colors. Its body is pale, nearly transparent, to avoid wasting energy on pigment. Instead, it grows long whiskers or finely tuned sensory organs, so sensitive that the slightest movement of water lets it see its surroundings. Its life pace is slow. It eats sparingly, reproduces little, lives longer than its relatives in the light. No frantic race, no noisy struggle. Its whole existence is a supple adaptation to a world without dawn or dusk. Blind shrimp, blind crabs, copepods, amphibians living in groundwater in parts of America and elsewhere are the same. No need for color to attract mates. No need for eyes to flee predators that are rare down there. Instead, they rely on sensitivity to dissolved chemicals, to currents, to subtle signals we cannot feel. Their bodies are tuned to minimalism, like a house stripped of everything unnecessary, keeping only what truly serves that specific environment. Deeper still, we meet bacteria and microbes that live in groundwater, in rock pores. They don't need sunlight but create energy by eating inorganic substances: iron, sulfur, methane, ammonium. Instead of running on photosynthetic sugars, they live on chemical reactions between water and rock, minerals and dissolved gases. We call this chemosynthetic life. It may sound complex, but its meaning is simple. With just water and rock, without plants, a small web of life can still exist. Such microbial communities have been found in deep groundwater, in sealed caves, even in exploratory wells, like ancient residents who never stepped onto the surface. If you are listening in the quiet now, you may feel something special. Instead of seeing the outer world as vast and demanding, you sense beneath you a very small, very slow, very frugal world that is incredibly resilient. Blind fish, pale shrimp, rock-eating bacteria do not care about stock markets, news cycles, political quarrels. They do one thing: endure as best they can on the scant water and energy available. In a way, they are the extreme image of adaptation, something each of us has practiced all our life, in our own way. Science looks at these creatures with eyes full of curiosity and respect. When biologists, geologists, and microbiologists first discovered communities living in deep caves and groundwater, independent of the sun, they realized this is not just an oddity of a few rare species. It is evidence that life can exist in places we once assumed were too harsh. From there, another door opened. If beneath Earth's surface, in darkness, in groundwater, life can persist so patiently, then on other planets and moons where the surface may be frozen, barren, but liquid water may exist underneath. There may also be similar hidden lifelines. Who knows? Scientists studying Mars, Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, all carry this lesson with them. They do not only search for old shorelines on the surface, they also hypothesize deep subsurface oceans beneath ice. If there is water, rock, and a source of chemical energy there similar to what sustains microbes in Earth's groundwater, then in principle, simple life could exist. We have not yet seen it directly, but every time we look through a microscope at a drop of groundwater on our own planet and see bacteria clinging to grains of rock, quietly metabolizing, it feels like a hint. Don't be too quick to limit your imagination about where life can endure. But for you, who are getting ready to sleep after a long day, this story doesn't need to turn into a heavy lecture about the universe. It can be a kind of comfort, because if those tiny creatures can find a way to live in absolute darkness, in scarcity, then this planet you're lying on is likely more resilient than the noisy headlines suggest. Worries about the future, climate change, a changing world, those are real, but alongside them, there are also stories of quiet endurance, groundwater still flowing, rock still being sculpted, bacteria still patiently building their own cycles, blind fish still gliding through calm darkness. If you have ever gone through seasons of life where you felt you were in a dark place, few options, little light, little recognition, then these creatures can be a very gentle mirror. They have let go of the need to display themselves, accepted the dark, and developed new senses. Many people at 60, 70, 80 have done something similar. Less need to compete for attention, less hunger for praise, and instead a finer sensitivity to small things. The laughter of grandchildren, a quiet afternoon, a cup of tea, a story before sleep. That too is a beautiful form of adaptation. The groundwater that sustains those communities of organisms also sustains plants, farms, and cities. It does not distinguish. It passes through rock fissures to feed bacteria and continues on to be pumped up, purified, and poured into your glass. In the moment you drink a sip of water, somewhere a few hundred or few thousand feet below, another droplet is falling in a cave, touching the back of a blind fish. Everything is connected, not in some vague poetic sense, but in a very real way. One water cycle, one planet. When people think of these lifelines away from the light, many feel a slight shiver, imagining dark caves and strange creatures. But in the gentle air of the evening, we can choose a different perspective. This is a deeper layer we are allowed to respect without needing to interfere. Like private compartments of memory each person holds inside, we don't have to shine a light into them, but knowing they exist makes a person and a planet richer. Next time you hear the word extremophiles, organisms that live in extreme conditions, you might remember those groundwater droplets, rock-eating bacteria, blind shrimp. They are not only objects of scientific curiosity, they are proof that life does not give up easily. And when you look back at your own life, how many times you've come through hardship, moved homes, changed jobs, endured loss and illness, yet kept on living, loving, and caring for others. You may see that you share that same instinct. Now, let the images of dark caves and strange creatures fade, as if you were turning off the last lights in the house, leaving only a soft glow. You don't have to go down there, don't have to explore it all. Just know that, beneath you, besides the water veins we've spoken of, there are also silent communities, proving that darkness is not always an ending. Sometimes it is simply another environment where life chooses to move slower, simpler, with less need to be seen. Let your heartbeat fall into that slow rhythm. Take one deep breath in and let it out gently. Those creatures in the dark will go on with their lives without needing us to worry for them. The earth will keep turning, water will keep cycling. You, having listened to one more layer of your planet's story, can feel a little more at ease as you close your eyes. If there are lifelines beneath other stars, they too will have their time to be discovered. But tonight, your only task is to allow yourself a good sleep on the warm surface of a world that still harbors far more resilience than we often think. And as we step together out of the world of those creatures quietly living in darkness, perhaps another question taps gently at your thoughts. If groundwater can support life so discreetly, what is it doing with the rivers, lakes, and ponds we see every day on the surface? Stay just as you are. No need to move. Simply picture, softly, that the familiar rivers, creeks, and lakes you've passed all your life are not sustained only by direct rain or melting snow. Behind the glittering surface is a silent gatekeeper, groundwater. It weaves through soil and rock, emerges from tiny springs, seeps into riverbeds and lake bottoms, keeping them from drying out after a long, hot season, filtering out impurities before fresh water returns to the sunlight. Groundwater and surface water are not two separate worlds, but two faces of one cycle, constantly exchanging, supporting, and sometimes hurting each other. Scientifically, many rivers, are fed mainly by groundwater for much of the year. When there is no rain, no snowmelt, and the water still flows, it is thanks to groundwater slowly seeping in from surrounding aquifers, what we call base flow. These seepage channels are like capillaries beneath the skin. You don't see them, but they keep the arm of the river from withering. Without them, many streams would be long, dry grooves during drought season, and the ecosystems of fish, insects, and aquatic plants could not survive. That is the first role of groundwater for surface water: stabilization. The second role is filtration. When rain falls on a field, forest, or neighborhood, some water runs off, carrying soil, fertilizer, oil, trash. Another portion seeps through the soil, meeting roots, soil bacteria, mineral grains. Along the way, many pollutants are held back, broken down, or adsorbed onto soil particles, digested by microbes. Water that reaches deeper tends to be cleaner than the runoff on the surface. When it becomes groundwater and then slowly re-emerges into streams and rivers, it has passed through a natural filter, slow but effective. Thanks to that, many creeks in vegetated areas stay clear, even after muddy rains upslope, because much of their flow comes from moderated, filtered groundwater. Throughout your life, you may have quietly benefited from this gatekeeper. The rivers you fished as a child, the creeks kids splashed in during the 60 seconds and 70 seconds, the small lakes that still held green water after hot summers. All of them owe something to groundwater keeping time. No noise, no demand to be mentioned. But because it is so quiet and slow, when groundwater is harmed, the consequences run deep, long, and often unseen. When pollutants such as nitrate from fertilizers, pesticides, oil, industrial chemicals, or poorly treated wastewater seep past the topsoil, they do not vanish. Some is trapped or broken down, but when the load is too high, or the geology lets water move quickly, contaminants travel with groundwater. The underground flow does not turn murky brown like a suddenly polluted river. It remains clear, silent, but may carry stains invisible to the naked eye. This is what makes groundwater both trustworthy and worrisome. Trustworthy because under normal circumstances, it filters and stabilizes. Worrisome because once polluted, it doesn't cleanse itself quickly the way rivers and lakes sometimes can through mixing and contact with air. Substances like nitrate, certain persistent organic compounds, and heavy metals can linger for a long time, moving slowly but steadily, traveling miles underground before surfacing in another well, another spring, another stream. People look at the clear water above and feel reassured, while the gatekeeper has already fallen ill without a sound. At your age, you may have witnessed such stories in the news or right in your community. A small town on shallow wells, only after many years discovering high nitrate from fertilizers, a neighborhood near industry noticing odd smells or colors in well water, streams that seemed clear but were affected by groundwater passing beneath landfills. All of these share the same lesson. We cannot simply look at surface water and feel safe. We must understand and respect what flows below. Yet in tonight's story, we're not turning toward fear. We choose a softer view. Understand in order to appreciate and care, because science also gives us tools to listen to this gatekeeper. Hydrologists, geologists, and environmental scientists use monitoring wells, lab analyses, water level records by season and year. They track nitrate, arsenic, pesticides, bacteria. You might picture groundwater as an elderly gatekeeper, patiently standing between two worlds. Above, rivers, lakes, rain, sun, human activity. Below, rock and deeper lifelines. Each raindrop that seeps down is asked, "What are you bringing?" If it brings clean soil and minerals, it is accepted with a smile. If it brings chemicals, trash, the gatekeeper tries to filter, to share the load with soil and microbes. But if the burden is too great, it does not shout. It simply carries on, slowly, and after many years, those burdens appear elsewhere in a family well, a stream, a reservoir. On a personal level, what can we do, you might say? At my age, what can I still change? Yet your generation has a vital role, passing experience and values to your children and grandchildren. You can tell them how the rivers of your childhood looked, how the well water tasted, how clear the sky was, how trees once flourished. These are not just nostalgic stories. They are reference points to help the next generation see what is being lost, what must be kept. When you tell them that clean water is not guaranteed, that the aquifer beneath their feet is tied directly to how they live, dump waste, use chemicals, farm, choose where to build, you are giving the gatekeeper more allies. In the soft air of evening, think back. How many times in life did you treat clean water as a given? Turn the tap. It's there. Flush. It's gone. Now you know another layer. Behind that convenience is a network of aquifers, reservoirs, treatment plants, scientific monitoring, and moral choices by communities. Knowing this is not to feel burdened, but to let each glass of water in your hand, each river in your memory, become more precious. Do you remember standing by a clear river or quiet lake, watching the surface mirror the sky, feeling your mind settle? Next time in imagination or in life, if you find yourself there, remember that clarity is not only water flowing and wind blowing. It is also the work of groundwater seeping into the bed, filtering what doesn't belong, keeping the soil along the banks moist, reassuring the roots, softening the blow of drought. Because of that, the river has a stronger resilience to short-term change. Now, give your eyes one more reason to close. You've traveled with me through ancient waters, aquifers, taste, caves, creatures in the dark, and now the guarding role of groundwater for surface water. Each layer points to one shared truth. Beneath the seemingly simple things of daily life, your glass of water, a river, a rainstorm, is a deeper system, more intricate and more enduring than we usually notice. When we realize this, we can live one notch slower, a bit more grateful, and trust that there are quiet forces holding us up. And as we entrust groundwater with the role of silent gatekeeper between rain and rivers, yet another question gently appears. These much larger forces, earthquakes, volcanoes, deep fractures in Earth's crust, what have they been whispering to the waters beneath our feet all these years? Stay just as you are. No need to picture anything too complex. We'll go slowly, very slowly. Imagine Earth not as a rigid block of stone, but as a living body, with crustal plates that slide, collide, pull apart, overlap. These motions created the Rockies, Sierra Nevada, Appalachians, long valleys, deep faults, ancient and young volcanic fields. Threading through all these cracks, faults, and tilted layers is groundwater. Water seeks the lowest, softest, most open paths. So tectonic motion does more than redraw continents. It quietly designs the underground routes along which groundwater flows. Scientifically, groundwater is always bound tightly to geological structure. Fractures, fault zones, and dipping rock layers are the highways or walls of underground flow. When plates shift even slowly, they can change how fractured or connected aquifers are. Over long time scales, uplifted mountains and subsided basins determine where recharge zones form and where discharge occurs. High ground takes in rain. Water begins its journey. Low ground releases it as springs, rivers, lakes. So every time we look at a groundwater map, we are also reading the outcome of millions of years of quakes, eruptions, compression, and stretching. Earthquakes, even small ones, draw our attention by shaking, by noise, by moving objects. But for groundwater, each tremor is a direct tap on the natural plumbing. A strong enough jolt can widen fractures, connecting aquifers once separate, or collapse small voids, erasing old storage. There have been cases where after a quake, a well that flowed steadily runs dry, or a long dry well comes back to life. The water is not magically added or taken away. Its paths have changed. One place is now linked to a new source. Another is blocked, diverted. Some farmers and well users feel this very clearly. One night, the ground shakes. Days later, they find their pumps drawing less or more. For them, an earthquake is not only TV news. It is a letter sent straight to the aquifer under their home. Once we understand that mechanism, we see Earth talking to water, and water carrying the message to us, sometimes gently, sometimes plainly. Volcanoes, too. We hear volcano and think of violent eruptions and glowing lava, but across longer spans, volcanoes leave a quiet legacy for groundwater. Basalt flows, ash, fractured volcanic rocks often form excellent aquifers. Many rich groundwater bodies lie within or atop ancient volcanic layers. Their porous, cracked structure is like a sponge, letting rain soak in, be stored, and then seep out down mountain slopes as perennial springs. So, where fire once poured out destruction, thousands of years later we may find abundant water, green landscapes, stable human settlements. Yet volcanoes also have a darker side in their dialogue with water. Heat from deep magma can warm groundwater, creating hot springs and steam vents. Minerals like arsenic, fluoride, boron may accompany them. If they accumulate in drinking water aquifers unmonitored, they can cause harm. Here, Earth's messages are not to frighten, but to remind. I am active, listen, and test. Modern science acts as interpreter, measuring seismicity, water chemistry, temperature, to understand what volcanoes and groundwater are quietly saying. For people in the U.S., especially near faults or volcanic regions such as California, the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, or around Yellowstone, this story is not abstract. You may have heard of hot springs, geysers, streams changing flow after quakes. These are small expressions of a larger conversation. Plates move, rock shifts, pressure changes, and groundwater responds. In daily life, this sometimes appears in very concrete ways. Changes in well levels, in flow of springs and lakes after geological events. But at this hour before sleep, we can see these phenomena from another angle, the angle of long rhythms. Big quakes and eruptions are threats and tragedies. No one should romanticize them. Yet between those rare events, Earth is constantly making tiny adjustments, lifting here, lowering there, cracking, healing. Groundwater threads along, finding new balances. Just as in each life, there are sudden shocks. But most of our time is spent in small, ongoing adjustments to keep going. Intriguingly, scientists today also watch groundwater as a secondary indicator of tectonic activity. Before some earthquakes, well levels shift, oddly rising or falling without rain. Chemical compositions may change slightly. These patterns are not yet clear enough to forecast quakes with certainty, but they do show that groundwater is very sensitive to stress deep in the crust. It's like feeling a twinge in your body before realizing you're getting sick. A subtle signal requiring patient observers. Hearing this, you may feel your planet is less unfeeling than it sometimes seems. It can send signals. We're only learning to read them, and once again, groundwater plays the reliable courier. Wherever the crust is squeezed or pulled, fractures change. Water responds sometimes by just a few inches. So, talking about earthquakes, volcanoes, and aquifers tonight is not to make you anxious, but to help you feel that you are lying on a living system with a voice, a pulse, the warnings, not on a mute block about to fail at any random moment. If you've lived long in regions without quakes or volcanoes, this may sound remote, but the deeper lesson is the same everywhere. What happens far beneath our feet, unseen, can touch our water, our crops, our lives. Understanding that makes us more humble and also more grateful for years of peace. Those ordinary days when you open the tap and clean water still comes, when surface and subsurface waters are in quiet harmony. Imagine, a few miles down, layers of rock stacked. Some once flowed as lava, some crushed by collisions, some broken into broad plains. In that mesh of fractures, water threads through, pooling here, draining there, sometimes to the sea. At times, when plates creep, fracture faces slide, water must choose new routes. From above, you still see grassland, roads, towns, but below, the conversation continues. Rock asks, water answers, shifts in well levels, sudden springs, lakes swelling or sinking with tremors are tiny letters from that dialogue. Tonight, as you listen, let that image be a low, steady music, not a disaster film. Everything in nature has two sides, destructive and creative. Thanks to volcanoes, we have fertile basalt soils. Thanks to tectonics, we have mountains and water-holding valleys. Thanks to fractures, groundwater finds shelter. Thanks to groundwater, we have springs, wells, ordinary glasses of water, and life in the dark. All of it weaves into one system where every time you pour a drink, you are unknowingly touching long geological history. If there is one thing you might carry from this story into sleep, perhaps it is a sense of being upheld. You are not lying on a meaningless flat. Beneath you are layers of rock that have endured fire and ice. Within the rock, water is moving along fractures born of vast forces. All of it, in some way, is cooperating to maintain conditions for life at the surface, where you have loved, worked, raised children, and now lie listening. Let your breath mirror that motion, very light, very slow, but steady. Inhale, thinking of uplift, of mountain ranges rising. Exhale, thinking of water entering cracks, filling spaces, easing pressure. In that dance, humans are brief travelers, but if we listen, we fear less, feel less alone, and hold a little more respect for this patient planet. And as we've listened to this long conversation between earthquakes, volcanoes, and the waters beneath our feet, another slow question emerges. If Earth can send signals through groundwater, have we, through what we've done on the surface, left marks that water cannot hide? Stay as you are, at an age where your body deserves rest, eyes half closed. No need to strain your imagination. Tonight we won't chase violent scenes. Instead, we turn to something very quiet. A few drops of water, a calm laboratory, tiny numbers, enough to tell the long story of an entire region. The subject may sound dry, but it carries a gentle light for someone who has lived through half a century or more. Groundwater is an honest witness. It does not lie. It remembers how we have lived. Scientifically, each unit of groundwater carries its own chemical fingerprint. It is the combination of minerals such as calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, bicarbonate, sulfate, chloride, trace elements such as iron, manganese, zinc, sometimes arsenic, lead, and especially isotopes, lighter and heavier versions of the same element. These ratios do not appear by accident. They reflect the bedrock the water has passed through, the climate at the time it infiltrated, its depth, how long it has resided, and also the human activities on the land above. Scientists can take samples from old wells and analyze the isotopic ratios of oxygen and hydrogen in the water to estimate when it entered the ground, before or after major climate shifts, before or after urbanization. They can look at nitrate levels to see how intensely and how long the land above has been fertilized. They can detect traces of certain industrial chemicals, solvents, fuels, pesticides banned decades ago but still lingering in some aquifers, like ink that cannot be erased from Earth's notebook. That is what makes groundwater such a special witness. It moves slowly, so when a wave of pollution enters, it does not rush away like a sudden flood in a river. It holds, carries, spreads it out, leaving traces that can be read long after the original event has been forgotten by people. A carelessly buried landfill, a leaking factory, a period of reckless fertilizer use, a deep-buried wartime fuel depot. All of these can later appear in water. Test results from a quiet family well many miles away. Water does not go online to accuse anyone, but chemistry does not know how to lie. If you think back over the history of America in your lifetime, you will remember phases of industrial booms, suburban expansion, agricultural chemicals, times when people spoke little about sustainability. Many of those things have changed for the better as science spoke up. Laws tightened, public awareness grew, but groundwater helps us see more clearly. The decades before that did not vanish. Their traces remain, and it is precisely by reading those traces that we get the chance to fix things. Where high nitrate is found, people adjust how they fertilize. Where industrial solvents are detected, areas are mapped, treated, and closed to use. Where heavy metals appear, sources are tracked, pipes are replaced, communities protected. It is not too late, as long as we are willing to listen. Hearing this, you may feel a faint sadness. So I've lived my whole life on land that, at times, we hurt this much. But I'd like to invite you to change the lens. What the water tells is not only guilt, it tells the whole truth. Both damage and efforts to repair. In places once polluted but later cleaned up, where discharges stopped, technologies changed, trees were planted, recharge areas protected. Today's groundwater analyses show toxic concentrations gradually decreasing, quality improving. That is gentle evidence that good choices made later are recorded too. Groundwater is not harsh, it is simply honest. And this is where the story touches the inner life of each person, especially those between 45, 60, 80, lying in a quiet room listening. Your life is like its own aquifer. The things that have happened, the things you're proud of, the mistakes, the unfinished parts do not disappear just because you wish to forget. They leave a fingerprint in your character, in how you speak, how you react, how you love, how you trust or doubt. But like groundwater, this honesty is not there to condemn. It is there to remind us that every choice has an echo. Someone who has spent many years being hot-tempered or selfish cannot suddenly become gentle and generous after one evening of telling themselves, "Tomorrow I'll change." Old reflexes, like contaminants that have seeped down, need time to be diluted, filtered by new actions. Conversely, someone who has spent a lifetime keeping their word, being decent, acting with integrity even when no one is watching, also builds within themselves a clean groundwater source, calmer, more trusting of others, less easily shaken by what is shallow or fleeting. What we sow does not vanish, it settles into the foundation. The lesson here is not, "It's too late." On the contrary, understanding groundwater shows us the value of slow but lasting change. If a piece of land stops discharging waste and clean rain begins to seep down, over the years, the aquifer will gradually improve. Likewise, if a person starts choosing gentler reactions, kinder words, cleaner decisions, even past midlife, those new layers of water will also soak in and slowly strain out what once burdened them. There is no need to deny the past. We only need to pour in enough clean water. Groundwater teaches us another thing about generational responsibility. The chemicals found today in a grandchild's well sometimes come from decisions made by a previous generation, and what we, or our children, do today with soil and water will be read by those born later in future water samples. That is the invisible link between generations. We drink the outcome of choices made before us, and we leave the bill for those who come after. This may sound heavy, But it is also a very real chance to see that our lives matter beyond our personal worries. For those in the later chapters of life, the greatest gift is not to force yourself into grand gestures, but to pass on the right story. You can tell your children and grandchildren about the river that used to be so clear you could see the bottom, about the old well with cool water, about fields without chemicals, about the times people didn't know and how they slowly learned. You can say to them, "Now you know more. You carry more responsibility for the water beneath your feet." That is a very gentle way to turn what groundwater tells into a lesson in human growth, living so that your fingerprints literally and figuratively do not harm others more than necessary. But let's return to this moment. In your room, there are no test tubes, no isotope analyzers, only a body that has worked enough and needs to be lulled to sleep. Picture a few scientists sitting somewhere in front of screens showing fine little curves they see in the groundwater of a region. This period is when nitrate starts dropping. That's good. That period shows traces of wartime fuels leaking. But now it's better. These stories don't make the news every day, but quietly prove when humans learn, they can repair, and when they repair, the water records it. Just like in your own life, there are mistakes no one knows but you, yet in the years that followed, you lived better, and everyone who meets you can feel it. That too is a kind of water sampling. People can taste the increased gentleness, fewer sharp edges, more patience. You don't need to file a report. The way you are is the evidence. Let this become a very soft reminder. Starting tomorrow, when you face a small choice, a word to a loved one, a comment online, a way of consuming, a way of treating the environment, or your own body, you might quietly ask yourself, if the water beneath my feet recorded this, would I feel at ease? Not to scold yourself, but to remember that everything leaves a trace, and you have the right to choose kinder ones. Now, return to your breath. No need to force it deep. Just steady. Inhale, imagining you're drawing in the understanding that groundwater is honest, but also patient. Exhale, letting go of the feeling that you must be perfect, letting go a bit of regret for what cannot be undone. Just as an aquifer once polluted can slowly become cleaner, your inner life always has a chance to recover, as long as you don't keep pouring more toxins into it. Outside, beneath the dark soil, the veins of water are still flowing, carrying the stories of rock, of trees, of humans. They do not rage, do not flatter. They simply report exactly what is, and precisely because of that, they are a very gentle mirror for anyone who wants to live more truthfully with themselves. What we do, we will meet again in some form. Instead of fear, we can be grateful for that, because if this world had no quietly honest part like groundwater, perhaps we would have gone much further astray. If groundwater is Earth's truthful memory, storing both what we've done wrong and what we've done right, then sooner or later a natural question appears. If the aquifer beneath our home could whisper, what would it say to us tonight, just before we fall asleep? Keep lying just as you are. No need to sit up. No need to try any harder. Let your room be just dim enough soft lamplight, or only a faint glow from the hallway. Outside, the world may still be noisy somewhere, but here, it is just you, your breathing, and one very gentle idea. Try listening to the water beneath you speak like an old friend, patient, who has watched many lifetimes pass by. If the aquifer beneath your home could speak, its first words likely would not be reproach. It is used to its slow rhythm, to receiving clean rain and dusty rain alike, wise choices and mistakes alike. Its voice, if we imagine it, would be low, warm, and long. It might say, "Thank you for beginning to look down, instead of only looking up. Thank you to communities who care about clean water, who drill wells properly, treat wastewater, plant trees in recharge areas, avoid letting chemicals seep carelessly into soil. Thank you to farmers who switch to efficient irrigation, engineers who improve technology, ordinary citizens willing to pay a little more tax so that water systems can be safe for everyone. Thank you to grandparents and parents who have told their children at the dinner table, clean water is precious. Don't waste it." Even if it was just a small reminder, from a scientific point of view, this imagined thank you is not vague at all. We clearly know that in many parts of the US, groundwater quality has improved thanks to stronger environmental laws, the phasing out of toxic chemicals, cleanup of old industrial sites, landfills, and former military bases. In some places, levels of nitrate, lead, solvents have declined. These trends are not miracles. They are the cumulative result of thousands of small decisions over many years. Groundwater sees this in the strict chemical sense. It records it. It responds by becoming safer, clearer, ready to sustain another generation. But if the aquifer truly spoke, it would surely also have a few worries to share very softly, like an elder relative who doesn't want to keep you awake, yet will not hide the truth. It might say, "I am afraid when you forget my timescale." Groundwater operates in units of years, decades. Humans are used to electoral cycles, business plans, short-term goals. When we pump too fast, use too hard, or dump carelessly, the consequences sometimes appear only after a generation has passed. The aquifer sees that more clearly than anyone. Falling water tables, slow-spreading plumes of pollution, wells once clear, now carrying warning signs. Its voice, to suit this hour, would not shout, "You've ruined everything." Instead, it would sound like a reminder, "Remember that I cannot keep up with your haste. If you want your grandchildren to have clean water, treat me like someone who lives slowly." And that is the part of the conversation that many of us, especially those who have lived through several decades of change, are best equipped to grasp, because you know the value of patience, accumulation, long-term consequence, better than any younger person just starting out. If the groundwater could speak to you directly right now, it might ask a very gentle question. How have you lived with the things you cannot see? Not only water, the hidden corners of family life, of work, of your own heart, those underground things, the feelings of others, the long tail of today's decisions, the effect of your words on your children's trust we often pay less attention to because they aren't immediately visible. Groundwater, with its chemical fingerprints, reminds us what happens quietly is no less real. From here, we can open out into a lesson in personal growth, softly, without forcing. Looking at how groundwater works, we see a few things. First, everything we do leaves a mark. No need to obsess, but we should be honest. A thoughtless outburst, a lie, a selfish choice do not always explode like a muddy river, but they can seep down, accumulate, and appear later as broken relationships, lost trust, or a heaviness in our own hearts. Conversely, every time we choose kindness, take responsibility, apologize, repair, that too is clean water, quietly soaking in. Time will acknowledge it, just as aquifers reflect efforts to clean soil and sources. Second, small, steady changes matter more than brief, dramatic bursts. You know this in health, finances, family. Groundwater repeats the lesson. It does not refill in one season, but over many seasons. If respected, it can recover. People are the same. No one is asking you, at this age, to overturn your whole life. But every calmer choice, each mindful step in how you live with others, with the environment, with your own body, adds to the clean layer within. Third, we are only temporary guests. The idea is familiar, but beside the groundwater story, it becomes more concrete. The water we use today may have begun its journey when our grandparents were young. Decisions about water now will touch our grandchildren's lives later. We arrive, drink, use, leave traces, and then we go. The water stays and goes on telling the story at 45, 60, 80. Knowing you are a temporary guest doesn't diminish you. It deepens your character. A considerate guest tries not to leave the room in worse shape than they found it. Now, let's turn these ideas into a very gentle meditation with the aquifer. Soft enough to lull you to sleep, deep enough to touch the kinder part of your thinking. Close your eyes if you haven't yet. Feel your body lying on the bed, the mattress, the pillow, the support beneath you. Gently imagine that under the floor, under the foundation, beneath the soil, there are thin veins of water, small pockets, slow streams moving through stone. You don't need to picture it exactly. Just know there is water under there. It is part of the cycle that has brought rain to cornfields for your meals, watered cattle, cooled the air, flowed into your home's tap. In your imagination, hear the voice of that water very low, very patient. Thank you for beginning to notice me, even a bit late. I'm not angry. I just want you to remember, you do not live alone in this world, and your choices, however small, reach deeper than you think. Let that sentence pass through you without defenses. It is not a verdict. It is a gentle reminder from a witness. Then the aquifer might say, I worry for those who come after, the same way you worry for your grandchildren. If you have ever lain awake for a sick grandchild, or anxious about your children's future, you know that feeling. Use that same love. It might say, to think a little further, how we use water, treat soil, tell the truth they are gifts or burdens we send down to them. Just take one slow breath and quietly acknowledge, yes, I understand. Then, as a small meditation, return to the question, tonight, if the water beneath my home could speak, what would it thank me for? And what would it worry about? Don't rush to answer. Let the question rest there, quiet as the groundwater. Maybe tomorrow, or when you listen again, your answers will be clearer. Perhaps a habit of wasting less, a choice to support more sustainable food, a gentle talk with your grandchildren about caring for the environment, or simply learning to live more truthfully. So the fingerprints of your life do not cloud anyone's well. The beautiful thing is, no one is too old to learn this. At any age, We can shift from living on autopilot to living with intention. Bit by bit, you are not required to carry the whole planet, but you can choose to leave the water within your small circle clearer. In your family, your street, your stories, your respect for something as small as a glass of water. Now, to close not with a loud bell, but with a very light breeze, I'd like to invite you to see yourself for a few silent seconds as a considerate guest. You came to Earth not empty-handed. You received water, air, food, love, memories. You will not leave empty-handed either. You will leave traces in others' hearts and in this world. If, after all these layers of stories about hidden waters, you keep only one thing, let it be this: I want the marks I leave, however small, not to wound the lifeline that nourishes those who come after. Inhale very slowly, as if drawing in a sip of clear water from deep underground. Exhale very slowly, as if returning something gentler to the planet. A thought less sharp, a resentment less heavy, one choice less selfish. You don't need to try anymore. The story is complete enough for tonight. If one day the groundwater could speak, may it tell our grandchildren. The earlier generations were not perfect, but they had begun to listen. And right now, in your quiet room, you are part of that answer. Sleep in peace, like a drop of water that has finally found its own channel. You can close your eyes now. Let your thoughts dissolve like mist. If your mind still wants to wander, let it continue its journey to the next video, where we'll go further into the mysteries of the inner self. And if your body is tired, just let this sound lull you into sleep. No need to try, only to breathe. And remember, everything you are looking for is already resting quietly within yourself.